Wave your hands in the air if you remembered my name. I see you. You are my favorite. Today I have some questions about social media. I want you to shout out which one you think deserves first place. If you could only use one social media platform for the rest of your life, would it be Snapchat or TikTok? You understood the assignment. Which influencer is number one in your book? Please tell me their name. I can't hear you. I don't know about that. In your free time, do you put scrolling through your feed in first place or hanging out with friends? If it's scrolling through your feed, stand up. You should get out more. I guess we don't always agree on what should be in first place. Or maybe we can.
All right, what's up, guys? All right, yeah, my name's Jake. All right, thank you guys for being here. We're going to be diving into week 2 of first place here. All right, so real quick, let's look at how things work. Have you guys ever wondered how things work? Because I can tell you that I sure have. Look at, like, FaceTime, for example. You can just go ahead and whip out your phone, and then you can call somebody, and you can see them from halfway across the world at the same time as they can see you. I don't know how that works. Or look at, VR, for example. You just slap on a headset, and all of a sudden, you're in a totally different world, but you're still standing there in the room. I don't know how that works, but I think it's incredible, and that absolutely blows me away. But at the same time, trying to figure out how things work can be very frustrating for me. I think it can be frustrating for us all as well. For example, I, as a kid, had a ton of remote-controlled cars and just toys in general like that, and I would break them a lot. And so I would take them and I would try to tear them apart and figure out how they worked, but I could never figure out how they worked, and so then I would just have broken toys strewn across the room. And so that was very frustrating to me. And so the more that I think about it, the more that I realize that a lot of the time we can feel that way about God as well, where we're frustrated that we can't pick apart everything and figure out why or how it all works in terms of faith. So I think we can all agree with that. Maybe you guys have wondered how your faith, or how faith really works in general. Maybe you've wondered if God is even out there at all. And if he is, maybe you're frustrated because you can't understand God or everything about God. I get it. For starters, we can't actually see God. That makes believing God really, really hard because, he's supposed to be there, but you can't always see him. And sometimes you can't always feel God, and he's always there with us, but nonetheless. Maybe you guys, just give me a second, sorry. All right, so sorry about that. Some of us walked in here today wondering if this stuff about God and faith in general is even real, or if it's something that we should place our faith in. And some of us walked in here today and we already have a faith and we go to church on Sundays and we believe in all these things. And the first part of us, the ones who are questioning things, are really similar to the ones who already believe. We who believe still have questions about our faith, and we still get frustrated over things and how our faith is and the questions that we have in it. And honestly, guys, that's totally okay. It's fine to have questions about faith and about God. They have an enormous potential to move you and motivate you to start looking and digging in more and starting to learn more about God. And that is amazing. So being curious about faith is a great thing. Feel free to ask questions. That's awesome, guys. So if you walked in here today and you guys had questions or doubts about God, I am really, really glad that you guys did. Because what we're going to discover today will help us get to know more about who God is and how he's always there and why he's always working and why he always wants us to know more. Of course, we're not the first people to ask questions about God and how faith really works. People have been doing this for thousands of years now. In fact, there was a man named Philip who lived in the same time as Jesus about 2,000 years ago. And what's interesting is that Philip actually was one of Jesus' closest friends. You see, he walked with Jesus and he talked with him and he studied him because Philip was watching him and he was starting to understand that there is something very unique about spending time with him. To Philip, it seemed like Jesus had this really unique understanding of who God is and how God works. And because of that, I think Philip decided to take his questions about God directly to Jesus himself. And so we're going to open up our Bibles real quick and we're going to flip to John 14, verse 9. And there it says, I didn't say the question. He was asking about God, sorry. Jesus replied, I have been with you all the time. Or Jesus answered, don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you such a long time? I don't know about you, but if I were Philip, I would be a little confused by that response. Of course, Philip knew Jesus. He'd spent a ton of time talking with him and learning from Jesus. But what did knowing Jesus have to do with knowing what God is like? How was this friendship with Jesus supposed to help Philip in understanding anything at all about God? Well, let's look at the next part of the verse where Jesus said to his friend, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Jesus responded in this way because he wanted Philip to understand that knowing Jesus is knowing God. Basically, Jesus was saying that, Philip, if you want to know what God is like, just look at me. Jesus used this one thing to change everything about the way we understand who God is. In that moment, Jesus was not only claiming to be God, he was telling Philip that everything he did and said was exactly as God would say and do. In other words, Jesus showed us who God is and how God works because he is God. Think about what this moment would have been like for Philip. He had been following Jesus and had experienced incredible moments along the way, and he just found out or realized that Jesus is God. He saw Jesus heal a blind man. He saw Jesus show forgiveness and patience to a woman in the middle of a really bad situation. He saw Jesus raise a dead guy named Lazarus back to life. He even saw Jesus kneel down to wash the feet of people the way that a servant would have done back at that time. He found out that Jesus was God. Philip had the opportunity to get to know Jesus. He watched the way Jesus cared for, loved, and healed all sorts of different people. As he got to know Jesus over time, Philip learned to love and trust Jesus. Before their conversation, Philip might have had a hard time understanding God because he couldn't see, hear, or even feel God. But after Jesus' response to Philip, he understood that there was a way to know much more about God, who God is, and how God works. And that was by getting to know Jesus. Jesus is God. How he lived is how God would have lived. What Jesus said is what God would say. And Philip wanted to know what God was really like, and so all he had to do was look to Jesus. And the same is true for us. Jesus is how you get to know God. Why is knowing God so important, you might ask? Well, one of Jesus' closest friends, Matthew, recorded a conversation that Jesus had with some really important people that gives us an idea. Let's take a look. And we're going to turn to Matthew 22, verse 36 through 40. Let me get there real quick. I had it marked, but I don't anymore. Teacher, what is your greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is your first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Jesus is saying that life is about loving God, loving people, and loving yourselves. That's what's most important, and that's what should be in first place for us. One way that we can love God is by getting to know God, and by getting to know God's heart, actions, character, and work is by getting to know God's heart, actions, character, and work. That's why we can love God. If Jesus shows us everything we need to know about who God really is, then Jesus is the answer to all of our questions about God. We get a chance to understand the way God works and what God cares about most when we get to know Jesus. We don't have to wonder how God works or if we'll ever figure it out. Instead, we get to look to see who Jesus is and what God is like, because Jesus is how you get to know God. If we're going to get to know God by getting to know Jesus, I think it's important for us to make getting to know Jesus first place in our lives right now. So here's some things that we can do to get to know him. First and foremost, we can learn. We can learn about Jesus and what he said and what he did and how he lived by reading real accounts in the Bible called the Gospels. The Gospels were written by real people who actually watched Jesus live and in person. They had the chance to pay attention to him and to learn. And that's what you get to do by reading their accounts. You can pay attention and learn and ask questions. Second is listen. Think of someone you know who loves Jesus. Maybe it's your small group or your life group leader or an adult that you live with or a friend. Ask them to tell you more of their story and what they've learned about Jesus. As you listen to them share, remember that we too can learn about Jesus from how others have experienced him in their lives as well. Now, if you don't fully believe all this God stuff yet, or maybe you're not sure if Jesus was telling the truth to Philip, if that's you, I totally understand. I've had similar doubts and questions along the way myself. And that's why I want to encourage you to learn and listen this week, guys. Make it a first place priority in your life to listen and learn. Make it your first place priority before you make your decision about faith. My hope for you all is that as we get to know Jesus by listening and learning and reading these stories, that we'll get to know God in a way that truly changes our lives and our faith. No matter where you are in your faith, I want you to remember this today. Jesus is how you get to know God, because Jesus is God. Listen, we'll always have questions about what God is like, but if we're better able to trust who God is by getting to know Jesus, today I'd love to encourage you all to share some of what you're wondering about God or discovering about God when you guys get to your life groups later. We created our life groups here to be a space where you can learn and grow together. So maybe the best place to begin to getting to know Jesus is in your life groups tonight. Now, as you guys get ready to leave here in a second, I want you to think about this one question. What is one way that you can get to know Jesus more? All right, let me pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for allowing these children to come in here tonight, God. We pray that if they have any questions, that they're able to voice it to you, Lord, to their small groups, their life groups, God, and to you as well. I pray that you can open up our hearts to learn more about you and from you, Lord. I pray that as we get to know Jesus, your Son, that we get to know you as well, God. And I pray these things in your name. Amen.